What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. I want to talk about the Deontay Wilder versus Chris Arreola numbers, and it was a success. They're saying it averaged at 1.8 million viewers, and it peaked over 2 million viewers. So I think these are strong numbers. Now, with new media, I give you guys the real. A lot of writers and different people, channels, they're not going to tell you that. For whatever reason, there's this grudge against PBC, and they're always held to a different standard. Just like some fighters are held to a different standard and other fighters get a pass for fighting mediocre competition, things of that sort. So Wilder versus Arreola, like, you really break it down, how bad are those numbers? 1.8 to 2 million, you know what I mean, depending on the average and the peak. To me, that's actually really good numbers because for starters, I don't blame Wilder for fighting Arreola. Is it the numero uno fight in the heavyweight division? Of course not. But he was willing to face his mandatory. He was willing to go over to Russia to face Alexander Povetkin. And through no fault of his own, Povetkin could not make the date because he failed a drug test. And the WBC called a halt to it while they did further investigation. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That is exactly what happened. Wilder flew home. They gave him a hometown fight. He was willing to fight in Russia, keep in mind. They gave him a hometown fight, and they picked an available opponent with a name, and it was Chris Arreola. Now, the thing you got to look at is this. Most people that I seen in the comment section considered the Chris Arreola fight a mismatch. They said at this point, Chris Arreola hasn't really looked good versus Kasi and some other people on PBC. So we don't give him a shot to beat Deontay Wilder. So with that in mind, the fact that this did 1.8 to 2 million is good numbers. But let some of the other writers tell it. They'll start saying a bunch of other stuff. And with new media, I break it down for you guys. I actually show you. Like, I'm reading articles and people are talking about Wilder versus Arreola. Basically, the numbers are abysmal, or they're saying this didn't do good compared to other stuff. Like, they're not even statistically comparing to other boxing events. You know what I mean? Sometimes I see them use PBC, like Robert Guerrero versus Keith Thurman, the very first grand opening, if you will, of PBC, and then they compare every fight to that, right? That's not going to make sense. Of course, Fanfara versus Joe Smith Jr. is not going to do what Keith Thurman versus Robert Guerrero did with Adrian Broner on the undercard. That's just simple mathematics. Andres Fanfara, he's a solid fighter, but he's nowhere near the star power of all those guys I just mentioned. You know what I mean? So the fact that you would even compare it is asinine. But now people are taking it a step further and comparing it to shows, TV shows. And the reason you can't do that, just so you guys see, I'm on Wikipedia, Dateline. I've seen a comparison to Dateline in 2020. Now, the thing that's interesting about that comparison is Dateline debuted March 31st, 1992, right? Some of you guys probably weren't even born. 1992. Several years ago, over a decade ago. That being said, the importance of that is if a show's been on from 1992 all the way to 2016, that means it's a long-running show, right? So people are familiar with this network and this show, right? NBC, they have a show called 2020 and Dateline, and we can look forward to it. Boxing, however, there was a hiatus where they said on the Porter versus Thurman telecast, Muhammad Ali was the very last person to fight on CBS TV before Porter Thurman. So Porter Thurman was the first time that fans had the ability to see boxing on free TV through that network, right? So rest in peace to Muhammad Ali, one of my favorites. He just recently passed away. That just goes to show you how long it has been since boxing has been on some of these networks, right? They're not known for boxing. HBO, Showtime, they're known for boxing because they've covered stuff from Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson, and Pacquiao, all the way to currently, right? Mayweather. But these other networks, that a lot of the ones, except for ESPN, a lot of these other networks, they're new to the boxing realm, meaning they're either new completely, like BET, Bounce. I don't think they ever covered boxing at all until PBC. You know what I mean? BET is not one. Rock Nation does fights with boxing, but I'm just saying that's a new network to cover boxing, right? But some of these other networks haven't covered it in several decades, like since Muhammad Ali was alive or fighting or whatever the case may be. And the importance of that is you have to look at generational gaps. Like Muhammad Ali, a lot of the old school people that watched boxing when Muhammad Ali was around, one, they may not be alive, or they may not even be into the sport now because it's a whole different game. There's a lot of politics, there's new players involved, and some people, I know a lot of old school people that are just like fond of kind of the old school fighters. Like they like the Sugar Ray Leonards and Haglers and Tommy Hearns and Tysons and stuff like that, Ali's, but they don't really like the new generation. They think it's too much politics, so they're kind of stuck in their ways. So for a network that is not known for carrying boxing predominantly, because they have other shows, CSI or whatever shows that they have, that is impressive. That is good, because you still have to, it's just like a new store coming into town. Like Walmart, most towns have a Walmart, but let's say there's a new food chain, like a Chipotle, and it's never, or In-N-Out Burgers, that's a better example, because In-N-Out Burger did not expand. It was popular on the West Coast, but I don't think they have it on the East Coast. They only recently got it in Texas. So when they got it to Texas, people had never experienced In-N-Out. If they never left their state, then there's a high likelihood that they never had In-N-Out. So they have to start from the ground up to build a reputation for good hamburgers from not being in that region, because they're mostly predominantly on the West Coast. If you live in Bakersfield, you live in LA, you live in Northern California, there's tons of In-N-Outs. But that's why when I have friends that come from like New York and stuff, we usually go to In-N-Out. I usually take people like, hey, check In-N-Out. You'll like the double, because they've never had it, because they live in Florida, they live in New York, other areas that don't really have In-N-Out Burger, right? So the point is, when you're the new kid on the block, you have to build a rapport. You have to let people know you're here, and that's what it is with PBC. PBC just came out last year, so with some of these networks, they have to cater and let the new generation, who clearly wasn't alive when Muhammad Ali was fighting, or they weren't watching boxing because they were too young or weren't born or whatever the situation is, they have to let the new generation know, hey, we cover boxing. If you want to check it out, here it is. And it's funny because I understand HBO is a paid premium channel that doesn't come with every cable package, but when Canelo versus Kirkland does just over 2 million, that's a critical success on HBO. But when it comes to PBC doing that on free TV, people act like it's a failure. Like, oh, it's still 2 million people who are privy to seeing your fighting style. And Deontay Wilder was having fun in there with Arreola. He was dancing, there was some showmanship, he got the stoppage, Arreola's face was getting lumped up, and he was having a good time. He revealed that he broke his hand after. This is entertainment, you know what I mean? It's been a while in general since Cannon Briggs, since we've even had an American heavyweight champion. And you got to keep in mind that he wasn't even fighting the guy he was supposed to be fighting. He was fighting a stand-in, understudy, if you will, in Chris Arreola. So imagine if he were to fight Anthony Joshua, if he was fighting Tyson Fury, if he fought the guy he was supposed to fight, Alexander Povetkin, on free TV. Imagine what those numbers would do. If he can generate these numbers with a fight that everybody in the comment section, and this is what's hurting a lot of the decafs and the dumb fans that who hate PBC and they leave all these crazy comments, is they don't do what they say. Like a lot of channels, they bash PBC, but tell them to stop reporting about PBC. Stop talking about Al Heyman fighters. If you hate PBC so much, take a stand, right? If I were to go to the KKK, I guarantee you they're not going to really condone you listening to music from the other side of people that they hate. Like they probably wouldn't dig hip hop music or be like, oh, I love Future. You know what I mean? Because that's not their cup of tea. They don't even like black people. Or if they don't like Hispanics, they're not going to want to listen to mariachi music or native music from other regions because they hate them. So why don't these other YouTube channels and writers, if you hate Heyman so much, you hate PBC, stop talking about them, stop writing articles. But you know that PBC has its grip on boxing, So you don't want to stop talking about it, because if you stop talking about PBC and all their fighters from Heyman, the vast Heyman stable, then you would realize that would fuck with your money, because that gives you dramatically less to talk about if you don't talk about PBC. PBC is on all the time, right? Look at Golden Boy. When is their last big fight card, right? Canelo Khan. When is their next one? Canelo Smith. What else are they doing in between? Maybe a couple LA fight clubs and stuff like that. So it's clear Al Heyman is just, he's damaging the game, and people are still finding some way to try to down the numbers, comparing it to shows that are in different genres. That doesn't even make sense. That's like Michael Jackson is one of the highest selling artists of all time. If you compare Michael's most successful album, let's say Thriller album, Off the Wall, right? You compare that to one of his later albums, like let's say Butterflies. Butterflies could have done good, but if you compare it to Thriller, which was a massive hit and has been out longer, then of course the numbers aren't they're gonna pale in comparison. That's just common sense. You look at anybody else's discography like that, that's been in the game for a long time. If they have a critical success type of album, then most likely that album is going to set the mark and it's going to be hard to beat. But who's really expecting Deontay Wilder versus Arreola to trump a card with Keith Thurman, Robert Guerrero, Adrian Broner, John Molina? You know what I mean? That, and the very first PBC card. Who's expecting Deontay Wilder versus last minute replacement Chris Arreola to trump Dateline, which has been on since 1992, when Tupac dropped his first album, Strictly for My Niggas, right? That doesn't even make sense. So compare it to boxing. Why don't people compare the numbers to, like, Gilberto Ramirez and Nonito Donaire fought on True TV, which is through Top Rank? Compare some of those numbers to PBC numbers if you want. And that's not even technically free TV. That's kind of a channel. True TV, not every cable package has it, but compare some of those numbers, see what they did. They don't even report those numbers. You notice that? Everybody's sitting back talking about Al Heyman numbers, PBC numbers, but they don't even report. Every time I see a True TV, like when Gilberto Ramirez and Donaire fought, I think Cesar Juarez on that card, and that was a good fight. But when he was fighting guys like that, they don't even tell you what the numbers are. Nobody's even reporting that. But people want to talk about Wilder versus Arreola, knowing that wasn't the first choice, knowing that through no fault of Deontay Wilder's, that fight fell apart, right? So it is what it is. Wilder, congratulations, rest up. You're injured, so I want to see him back soon. And if you fight somebody with a bigger name, then it should do even better numbers. Let me know what you guys think. Drop it in the comment section. Make sure you like my video as always. Hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video, it's Ego signing off.